Luna 2 has arguably given us one of the greatest Archon quests we have ever had. But of course, the one who stood out the most is Rerir, who we now have a clear understanding of. So let us retell the tragic tale of one of the 5 sinners of Khaenri'ah, Rerir, the Rächer of Solnari. Unlike the other sinners, Rerir was a man of humble origins. He was an intelligence officer who served King Ermin, who followed out his order to eliminate the descendants of the Crimson Moon dynasty. It was undoubtedly a cruel job, and Rerir had to repeatedly convince himself that what he was doing was for the benefit of Khaenri'ah and that he was just following orders. As a result, he withheld the details of his job from his girlfriend Tholindis, whom he loved dearly and feared her rejection if she knew. He proposed to her, though she never gave him an answer. One evening, when he was having drinks with Dainsleif and his brother Vedrfolnir, when the topic of his engagement was brought up, he noticed Vedrfolnir was holding back something. His paranoia over his reaction starts to manifest as abyssal voices in his head, posing as Vedrfolnir, causing him to slowly spiral. Tholindis was a researcher of moon marrow at the Universitas Magistrorum. She hoped to find a way to dispel the madness that plagued Khaenri'ah, the cause of which she believed to be the outsider, likely referring to the traveler's sibling. So through her research, she discovered that the moon marrow can serve as a gateway to another world beyond Teyvat, which she was ever curious about of what lies on the other side. But little did Rerir know that she too was one of the descendants of the Crimson Moon dynasty. Rerir only found out when Tholindis showed up on his list of targets, so Rerir refused to carry on with the king's plan to exterminate the descendants of the Crimson Moon dynasty. It all came to a turning point when Vedrfolnir was blinded and thrown in prison by the king after being displeased with Vedrfolnir's warning about Khaenri'ah's future. Dainsleif gathered Rerir, Sertologi, Ryandaughtr, and Hroptatyr to storm the palace to rescue his brother and take down the king, who he now believed was a threat to Khaenri'ah. Rerir, however, was not in it out of a sense of justice, but because this was his chance to depose of a tyrant who stood in the way of his happy ending with Tholindis. When Rerir broke Vedrfolnir out of prison, Vedrfolnir offers him his final words on Tholindis, that for as long as he lives, his story with Tholindis will not come to an end, and that's the only chance he has to fight back against fate. And right then, abyssal energy starts to flow through Khaenri'ah, and Vedrfolnir warned Rerir to go to the Universitas Magistrorum, where Tholindis was. In fear for her safety, he rushed over to save her, but instead of leaving with Rerir, she chose to open up a moon gate and go through instead. The portal closed before he could follow her in, and he was left in total despair. And so the abyssal voices he had been hearing had finally offered him a solution, a new means to open the path to find Tholindis. And so he returned to the palace, where he took hold of abyssal power, becoming one of the 5 sinners of Khaenri'ah. He was then able to reopen the portal and went in. We don't exactly know where it took them or what happened there. One theory suggested by Flins was that there was something on the other side that caused his body to be ripped apart and shattered into pieces. The only way he survived was due to the abyssal power that flowed through him. Those fragments were carried through time, seeking to be whole again so he could be resurrected. And with that, he is now left with an unrelenting obsession with the moons. But this assumption has some pretty big implications, which I'm going to touch on in a little bit. Albedo and Durin reach the conclusion that there's no way to defeat him once and for all because they have no way to completely eradicate the abyss. He is simply too powerful and no better than an abyssal manifestation. So while the traveler, Flins, Nefer, and Lauma fought him to stall for time, Albedo and Durin purified and channeled Rerir's power to Columbina so she can become strong enough to open a moon gate and face Rerir. And Dainsleif used his power to hold it open. Rerir was pushed through and basically ejected out of Teyvat. This alone raises a lot of questions and implications. If Flins is right about there being something powerful enough to rip apart Rerir on the other side of the gate, then there isn't really much hope for Tholindis. And if it was truly something outside of Teyvat that did this to Rerir, then how did his fragments end up back inside, scattered across Nod-krai? This alone tells us that his story is still missing a few pieces. Rerir said that his fragments were carried through time, but if he was torn to shreds outside of Teyvat, does it mean his fragments were carried through both time and space to end up in Nod-krai? Could there be other people involved in what happened to his fragments? Just some food for thought. But we still know very little about where this moon gate leads, or if this really is the end of Rerir's story. In fact, this posted by Hoyoverse literally tells us that his story is far from over. He's still waiting for Vetterfulnir's prophecy about him and Tholindis to come true, that for as long as he lives, their story will not end. Columbina told us that the moon gate is supposed to be the path to the moon, so with Rerir having been pushed through one, could the moon be where Rerir was transported? If that's the case, it's probably how he's gonna become our next weekly boss. During the quest, Rerir has spoken extensively about wanting to tear down the moon, and by potentially sending him there, we may have just served him the opportunity to do so on a golden platter. What's remained unchanged is that Columbina still wants to return to the moon to uncover the truth of her existence, so the moon gate will probably be our path to get there, which suggests that we might encounter Rerir again. So hopefully soon, we might be able to gain some closure to Rerir's story. His tale is no doubt a tragic one, a man who is willing to destroy everything for the sake of his love, but he is a monster nonetheless. So what kind of ending do you think Rerir truly deserves? Let me know your thoughts and theories in the comments, and consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Thank you for watching.